Evening and welcome to our Vancouver DevOps meetup. Together, my name is Andre Kaminsky, and together with Willie, Ilse, and Martin, I am co-organizer of this meetup. Today's format is going to be slightly different because we've got a panel discussion and it's going to be pretty exciting. But before we start, I just want to share with you a personal story. In mid-1990s, I lived in Cape Town in South Africa, and my company at the time collaborated with this very small company that was called Mosaic Software, and they were the payment processor. The founder of this company was Willem van Biljon, and he was a brilliant guy, and he was very hands-on. He was even coding at the time, I remember. Now, a few years later, Willem joined Amazon, and he was leading the development of EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud. So he is actually the guy who was one of the first who actually built what AWS is today. And obviously, Amazon today has got a lot of offerings. It's not only technology company, it's obviously is also retail and video streaming platform. But what is most important for this organization and what is important for us within DevOps, where our interests are, is a very specific culture. So today we will have the opportunity to hear about this culture firsthand from the entire panel of our guests. Willie, over to you.
Thank you, Andre. So before we begin with our main attraction, just a few housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded and will be shared on our Meetup YouTube channel in about a month's time. So please mute your microphones when not talking. And remember, we need your feedback to improve our meetups and also your ideas for future sessions. And now, for the main attraction, I am really excited to introduce Melissa O'Brien, the leader of enterprise support for AWS, independent software vendors, and digital native customers in Canada. Melissa has been in tech in Vancouver for 26 years and is passionate about building and leading high-functioning teams to deliver cloud solutions and guide their customers in their cloud journey. Now in her third year in AWS, she loves leading the global ID&E committee for enterprise support with a focus on increasing and retaining diverse builders. And now for a fun fact. Melissa once took away and hid my precious laptop, forcing me to unplug from the matrix and relax for 2 agonizing weeks. Melissa, handing over to you to moderate tonight's exciting event. The virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. The theft of the laptop seems like only yesterday, but it was a couple years ago. Thank you to the Vancouver DevOps Meetup for hosting this amazing event and giving us the opportunity to discuss Amazon's peculiar culture with our tech friends in Vancouver. Today, we've assembled a panel of smart and passionate Amazonians to chat about life at Amazon and AWS. We have people from both, and to answer all your burning questions. We want to leave you today with an understanding of how alignment within Amazon is centered on one thing and one thing only, and that is customer obsession. We'll walk you through how Amazon uses their infamous leadership principles every day, how we maintain a day one culture, how we've scaled using mechanisms and two-way door decision making. Today, our team will start with a discussion of topics from hiring and interviewing at Amazon to AWS's well-architected framework and how it helps guide our customers on building, running, and operating in the cloud. Then we'll move on to application modernization and event-driven architecture. So I'm going to start today by introducing the panel members, and then we'll chat about our culture and we'll take questions from the crowd. We can use the raise hands feature to ask your questions, and then we'll fill in the blanks with any questions that pop up from the chat. So now that I know it's recorded, I will say the opinions expressed here are those of our own and not of Amazon or AWS. And the only other thing, I see there's 34 people, so we should be good. But we encourage you to save, if there's a lot of questions being asked, to save your best questions, just to allow all your friends that are joining to ask questions as well, just in case we don't get through everyone's questions. And then at the end, we value feedback and data. We're data-driven here at Amazon, so there will be a survey. We also believe in bribery, apparently, because if you fill in that survey, we'll enter you for a draw for either a custom hoodie, AWS Amazon hoodie, or a $50 Amazon gift card. So there we go. Awesome. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to my panel members to introduce themselves, and I will start with NK.
Hi, everyone. My name is NK, and I am a tech recruitment lead at Amazon, and I am with the Amazon operations and physical stores here in Canada. I'm based out of Alberta, Canada, and I've been with Amazon for about 2 years now. But I've worked in like HR recruitment for over 10 years, and I'm very passionate about hiring people and diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, NK. Next up is Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Anna Reinemer. I am from Colombia. I moved to Vancouver with Amazon 8 years ago, and I am a software developer manager. I have led teams in multiple parts of Amazon. So I've led teams in the internal recruiting engine team, in recruiting, in Zappos as well. And my latest position, like my latest team, is in the third-party seller pricing organization. And I'm really happy about being at Amazon for all this long. So happy to be here and share with you the internal tools of development.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And now over to our friend in Toronto, who is sitting in the dark, Rohit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rohit Joshi. I'm a senior solution architect working with Amazon startups team. So I've been with Amazon for around 4 years, just over 4 years. So before joining as a solution architect, I was with the AWS professional services team, worked with multiple mid-sized and enterprise companies. And then prior to that, I also worked with multiple startups and then other enterprise companies. Yeah, I'm a big advocate of DevOps. Excited to talk about it. And thanks for having us here.
Awesome. Thank you, Rohit. And now from Toronto to Calgary for our friend Sean.
All right, thanks, Melissa. So Sean Kendall, I'm a senior solution architect as well here at AWS. I am going on to my 4th year in September, so I'm rounding up to 4. I actually started as a technical account manager, and I worked with Melissa quite a bit, but then, yeah, moved over onto the solution architecture side. Also a serverless specialist. So on my solution architect piece, I do work with enterprise engaged customers, which is typically if you're working for a company that does a lot of AWS or has kind of a higher spend on AWS, that's the types of accounts I work on. And then any account that really likes to work on serverless and anyone who likes to learn serverless, I like to get in there as well. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. And finally, Bill Boora back to Vancouver.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Bill Boora. I lead our application modernization, go-to-market, and business development for our compute services here in Canada. Sean and I are good friends because serverless is near and dear to my heart. I've been with AWS for just actually 4 years last week, and I've had a chance to work in the worldwide team, talking to global customers, as well as obviously as supporting Canada here. I am a developer when I first joined the industry, but I've worn many hats. So I've been a developer, a product manager, partner and alliance guy, a go-to-market person. So I've kind of seen it all. Semiconductor, telco, cloud computing. So everything's kind of coming together. So yeah, really looking forward to the session today. And as you work through your own projects, if you've got anything modern and you're thinking AWS, definitely reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Okay, we have all the panel on the screen. We are ready to go. So I'll start with some questions that we prepared beforehand. We'll start with the subject of Amazon's peculiar culture, and that is all anchored on one thing. So the question for the panel is, what are the leadership principles and how do we use them in our day-to-day? Anna.
So the leadership principles are the DNA that keeps Amazon together. So to be honest, when I first joined Amazon, I learned about the leadership principles from the recruiter, because as part of the interview process, I was told to prepare stories and align my work, my career to the leadership principles. And it sounded a little weird. And I was like, okay, no, I can do that. It's fine. That makes sense. Let's go with the flow. But when I joined, I discovered that no, it's for real. It is part of the culture. It's part of the DNA. The leadership principles guide decision-making in our everyday, in ideas for new projects, in the data that we work with, in the healthy balance that is created between one leadership principle and the other. So you want to go bias for action, and you also want to insist in the higher standards. There's like a balance, because how much is too fast and how much it isn't. How do you invest in the growth of your team or the growth of yourself? There's hire and develop the best while you're still trying to deliver results. And the one that it encompasses it all, and like the most important, but we don't call out any favorites, customer obsession. So everything you work with is from the view of the customer, and to make sure that you always identify who the customer is and you're trying to solve a problem. So as you can see, it's an everyday life, and it's part of you becomes part of your vocabulary and the way you talk to each other. Even as a people manager, the strengths and the growth ideas, even for performance, and like to make sure that my team is always growing and cohesive, everything is around the leadership principles. So it is there. It's there. They are real.
Thank you. That's awesome. Do you have a favorite leadership principle, Anna?
I like think big and ownership.
Tell me about think big. That's one that we always, I think that's the one we see the most on our growth opportunities for our teams.
Yes. So I would say, like, with think big, you want to always be like strategic. And when you're looking at solving a problem, you want to see that problem, but at the same time, you're like, oh, what if you think about it like from a broader perspective and not just solve for here, but think to scale? So that's where all these think big ideas come in, and you're not focusing on the right now, but like you're like, whoa, let's think 3 years in the future. How could this look there? But it's also the hardest one to apply and the hardest one to like really be good at. So that's usually my biggest growth area year over year, because that's where I want to be. And the other one that I really like to call out is learn and be curious too, because you always want to have this like growth mentality in everyone continuously, because that's the only way that you get better. So you see, it's 14 LPs now, and they all play a different role, and they are all apply all the time in your life.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about their favorite LP? Or should we move on? Okay, we're good. All right.
I can always talk about mine. The one favorite one is frugality. Because when you were saying you're going to be giving out a sweatshirt, I know I'm not allowed ordering a sweatshirt, so I might do your survey. But
yeah, you're going to have to put in a fake email address so I don't know it's you. And a fake address. It's going to get complicated, Sean. It's true.
Yeah, I would actually say probably hire and develop the best is one of my favorites, because I like passing on information to other Amazonians and even non-Amazonians, right? So I do a lot of internal training at Amazon just to make sure that, you know, both in the serverless world and non-serverless world, I make sure other Amazonians are really, you know, learning everything they need to learn and making everyone just better.
Yep, it's awesome. Mentoring, coaching, and teaching others is pretty much everyone's bread and butter here at Amazon. So thank you. Awesome. Okay, here's the next question. Is it true or is it fake news that there are no PowerPoint presentations at Amazon? And if whoever's talking about that, maybe chat a little bit about narratives, one pagers, two pagers, and how that works.
Yeah, so when I joined Amazon or AWS, I was really concerned that there was no PowerPoint because I built a career on PowerPoint. So presentations are kind of my bread and butter. So I would say that it's true and false. I think it depends on which area of the business you're in. I know our technical teams rely less on PowerPoint, whereas our field-facing and sales-facing, customer-facing teams still do. So yes, PowerPoint is still around and I use it daily. But what are narratives and one pagers and two pagers? The way that we communicate and we make decisions at Amazon or AWS is really through the document. And when I came into AWS, I thought this is really strange because I can get in front of a crowd of people and I can talk to my ideas. But what they found was when you do that, it gives an edge to somebody that's more charismatic and is a good presenter. It also lets you maybe make up some things on the fly. And oftentimes, if you've been in meetings, you're on slide 1 and somebody asks you a question that's going to be answered on slide 3, and then you get all derailed. So the documents or narratives are really a written format in terms of if you've got an idea, it might be a 2-pager when it's some sort of a review. If there's planning cycles, it gets even longer. But it's really, that's where you put all of your ideas down on paper. And what it does is it gives everyone the same opportunity to read the same information, usually at the same time. They have everything in front of them, and then they can start asking questions about things that maybe they need clarification on or what's not in that document. And it really starts to get the ideas and conversations going. I also find that by writing, and this is probably my biggest aha moment here at AWS, it really forces us to be data-driven and to think about what we are writing. And oftentimes, like I've spent a lot of hours writing these simple, maybe it's a 1-pager, but it's because I go back and I continually review and do I have the right data points? Does this make sense to my readers? And so I'm actually pretty sold on the writing side of things. But again, I will default to PowerPoint to close the deal if need be.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I think just to add on that, when you write when you said we're all at the same spot. So what actually happens when you go into a meeting at Amazon, it's an hour-long meeting. Everyone will join and they'll say, okay, everyone's going to read the document till 35 minutes past the hour or 25 minutes past the hour. Everyone will go off camera and time within that meeting to read the documents and add feedback to the document. And through document reads is where you get iterations of new ideas, challenging ideas, asking more questions. If there's data missing, you will know immediately because you'll have 1,000 questions that are different viewpoints and different ideas and different data points that the readers are looking for. And through that is the different iterations of the narratives, which just actually helps with growing the idea and inventing and simplify, which is another one of our leadership principles. So awesome. Thank you for that. Great. Okay. This is one question. I've done a couple panels now, and this is one question that I have gotten quite often, specifically to any panels I've done around recruitment. Is it our experience that we work endless hours to keep up with the workload at Amazon?
All right, I'll take this one. So I remember before I joined AWS, I did read a lot of reviews and just comments people were saying, and everyone was pretty much posting online that you work like crazy and you never get time for yourself. And so I was a little concerned with that. And of course, during my recruitment, I met with my manager and I was really told that you can work as much or as little as you want. And when I say as little as you want, I mean, that's kind of, you have a role and you have to really meet your role. And the thing with Amazon is everybody around you is absolutely amazing at their jobs and they're all raising the bar. And so you're kind of pushed to raise the bar. So there's not really a low bar at all at Amazon. You're always trying to be the best of yourself. However, I would say, on your base job, you're probably not overworked. Now, what people do, like myself, is Amazon will give you as much work as you can take. And if you don't say no, you can work basically, 23 to 26 hours a day. And that is something I do. So, I'm a serverless specialist, so I take a whole bunch of side work. I get into pretty much any little thing that I can, and that's just something that you control. So, to be honest, the workload is pretty much like any other company. It's very standard. Work-life balance is absolutely amazing. I get the time off whenever I need it. Like I've never really been, affected by that. I also have a family, right? I have 2 boys and a wife, and we stay very busy with stuff. But yes, I do take a lot of work myself. So when you work at Amazon, it's really up to you. You can do your core role. You're probably going to be one of the people that will, take on more things. And then that kind of drives how much work you actually do and how many extra hours you may want to spend.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to share their experience with this? I find that the work ebb and flows a bit with deadlines. I think to Sean's point, when I sign up for 10 things, then I'm going to deliver 10 things. If I sign up for one thing, I'll deliver one thing. I always encourage people when they join not to get too ambitious. There's going to be so many exciting things that they're passionate about to get involved in, and to temper your enthusiasm at first, learn your role, figure out all the different places where you want to help out and contribute, and then sign up then when you're sort of understand your role a bit more, because otherwise you can sign up for all the things and then get a little bit busy.
Yeah. I found you really have to learn how to say no. I still have a problem with that. I say yes to everything, but you really have to learn how to say no. Very
helpful culture, right? Everyone offers to help you, and then people ask for help quite a bit. So you have to say, I'd love to help, not right now. I'd love to help maybe in a bit.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
I think that helpful culture really shines through when we think of our technology roles. So as a serverless guy, we've got these technical field communities where you can sign up in a certain area. So Sean and I met each other because he is a serverless technical field community member. It's really based on volunteering. So you join this committee, we might have, customers asking questions, and it gets sent to a pool of our TFC people. And they help out. Sean recently joined me in Toronto for an application modernization summit last week. Again, these were volunteers from our TFC. So there's a lot of opportunity at AWS to do things that you're passionate about, find areas that you want to contribute. You can go meet customers, you can go to events, you can go to reInvent, for example. And again, as Sean and Melissa mentioned, it really does ebb and flow. There's times, my weekends are my weekends, my evenings are usually my evenings, except if I'm prepping for something that's due. But that's really not that different than any of the other organizations I've worked for in the past. So yeah, if you're looking to volunteer and you're passionate about something, there's an opportunity here.
Exactly. Awesome. Great.
Yeah, I can chime in as someone who's not technical. So as you said, the work kind of ebbs. There's sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but then Amazon lets you kind of own your work, on what you do, and deliver results at your own pace. And then there are so many projects that come up, and the people ask you if you want to join this project, or if you want to volunteer, and then you have the ability to want to say no or say yes as you want to, and then you manage your workload as you want. So to answer the question, the workload is manageable as long as you know how to say no, and you know how to prioritize and manage what you currently do, more or less.
I feel like now I need to say something. So
some people have their hands raised though.
So I think like when I joined, probably I think Amazon is one of the biggest companies. Like I joined, and then I see like a lot of resources at that time, and then I'm trying to get my hands on like everything, and then at that time initially probably you're trying to do a lot of things parallelly, and then there's always colleagues around you telling you, okay, you need to calm down and then take one at a time. You can say no, and then you slowly get to your comfortable position, and then that's my journey. Like it was like a peak, and then I find my balance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a way in Zoom to say who put their hand up first? We can do that in Amazon Chime. I'm just going to go alphabetical. Naveen. Not alphabetical.
Hey, hi, Melissa.
Hi.
This is Naveen, and I'm SRE in Andre's team. My question is like, how does Amazon incorporate feedback from its employee to refine its leadership principles.
Ooh. How does Amazon incorporate feedback from its employees to update and refine its leadership principles? That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I can take that. So Amazon has, so not only in the fulfillment centers, but also in the corporate world. So we have what we call voice of recruiting. For me as a recruiter, we have, when you go to the operations, like the field operations, we have voice of the business, voice of the associates, voice of the customers. And we are allowed to give feedback, give ideas on what we think. And Amazon uses that feedback that we give based on the surveys and what people respond to develop and refine the LPs. And so I think Amazon, aside from the LPs that are developed, Amazon has, will I say, a culture that is, will I say, created from the LPs. And this culture is refined and developed based on the service and responses we receive, based on the voice of the business, or voice of recruiting. So I would say definitely that Amazon does take feedback and uses it to refine the way we work on our LPs, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, LK.
Awesome. Ikbaldeep.
Hi. We were talking about workload. So I had a question regarding that. I know Sean mentioned that you could say yes to as much work. I wanted to know what's the incentive, like to an employee, what incentive makes them say yes to a project or volunteer for a project?
That's yeah, I mean, I can answer that one. So I'll say at the start, the incentive, I don't really know how they do it. There's really no like official incentive except for just like feeling good and getting recognition. That's really it. And it's funny, I think back and it's like, what do I really get out of this? I really just get the fulfillment that I've done, whatever that thing is. Now I do know, like, one thing we do is, we have these all hands meetings, kind of like a town hall, or I guess you may call them all hands at organizations you work at, where everybody gets together, and we have a lot of different all hands. Like, we'll have one for enterprise support, one for solution architects, one for all of Canada, one for all of North America, one for all of AWS. And at all of these all hands, you get recognition, right? So they'll toss my picture up on the screen and say, Sean did X, Y, and Z. Thanks for doing this. This is what the outcome was. So it's really all about that recognition. Now, we also have a recognition system internally where pretty much anybody can say, well, Sean did something great for me. And then they can put that into the system and it gets broadcasted out to your manager, as well as like your manager can then broadcast it out to the rest of your team. So again, that really incentivizes that, you to do that work, just so that people kind of know what you're doing, makes you feel good. That's why I do it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Also, I will say some roles have it built in. And so the role that I lead, which is the technical account managers, they are encouraged to contribute to the business, to knowledge sharing, to mentoring. So it is actually part of their job and role, and it goes on, sort of what we call the talent review cycle, year over year. So it does actually contribute to whether they are meeting the bar, raising the bar, year over year as well. So it is, Bill used the word volunteering, which I was like, oh, it kind of sounds like it's doing it for free, but it is part of the role, and it is part of how you build and grow and invent and simplify at AWS altogether. So yeah, it is also part of people's jobs as well to share knowledge.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more like learning something new. To be honest, when I join or volunteer for programs, I try to look for programs that I have not so much knowledge about. It's just so that, like this panel example, I have knowledge. I don't know a lot about DevOps because I recruit for the different field altogether, and I'm going to learn what containerization is and what serverless is and all that. So I'm learning something new, to be honest, here. And then I'm also teaching people about what it means to hire and recruit at Amazon and interview on Amazon too. So it's not just for me recognition or visibility, but really learning something new, stretching myself a little bit and seeing how far I can go. And of course, impacting knowledge on other people too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So I think we're good on the culture, but as we go into the next sections, we'll weave in the culture will just keep popping up. You'll see. But the next major category that we're going to chat about tonight is DevOps practices. in honor of the DevOps meetup. And we've got two awesome viewpoints here from DevOps. We have Anna, who's the SDM, and then we have Rohit, who's previous DevOps consultant working with other customers in their DevOps practices. So I think it's kind of a cool mix of two different DevOps viewpoints. So first question is about Amazon development teams. So Anna, do Amazon development teams run agile work practices like Scrum or Kanban? How frequently are the stand-ups? What are the ceremonies like? Tell us a little bit about how your team or how the teams are run.
So Amazon, most teams, I would say all teams, are agile, and there's something called a 2-pizza team, and it's a very random Amazon internal way of saying that if you can feed a team with 2 pizzas, that's the size of your team. Another internal perks and peculiar parts of the Amazon culture. But on the agile, all the teams are agile, and they run. So every team, our organization is free to decide if they do Scrum or if they do Kanban or they do their own merged flavor of it. But all the teams I've run, so I've run teams that do Scrum, and my current team does Kanban. And both methodologies for agile work both have, so Scrum has more strict or more prescribed ceremonies that, depending on how you do them, could be a little more tedious because it would probably take a little more time. Kanban has less ceremonies, but the important part is that if you have a really well-groomed backlog of features or your stories that you're going to work on and they're really well defined, both will work. And the way we do things is every day you meet for a daily stand-up, and then you describe what you're blocked on and what you're going to be working on, depending, following your board, your sprint board or your Kanban board.
Awesome. Thank you. How do you prioritize your features that are going to be delivered?
It's all data. So Amazon is data-driven. So we work with the product manager. So there's an entire role called the product manager, and the product manager comes in and, working backwards from the customer, creates what are the user stories or all the epics or the features that you're going to be working on as a team. And you prioritize from most impact and from most data, and the ones that are going to add more value to the customer, or the ones that are smaller and very easy but have a lot of impact. So like the paper cuts that you want to put in there in your backlog fast, add value to the customers, go in with it. And it's mostly data driven. So that's where you go in your backlog and you continuously groom it with your product managers, making sure that what you put into your board or into your sprint is the most important thing you want to work on.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we have a hand up. Pallav.
Yeah, hi. So my question, actually, I have 2 questions. So the first question is, what made you decide, or your team decide, that you want to go with Scrum or Kanban? And then how multiple Scrum teams communicate with each other? And if they're using different methodologies, does this create any sort of hindrance or issues within the teams?
Really good question. So we decided, so my current team, we just started in this new space for my team. I offered the option, because we're starting from scratch, if we wanted to go with Scrum or with Kanban. And they chose Kanban because of the team is mature, they're used to working with each other, and because Kanban allows you to move in faster through the process, through the items in all your different lanes in your Kanban board. If the benefits that Scrum may offer on the other side is that you define sprints. So it's you time box all your things, you know exactly how you're going to work, you define what is your velocity or your capacity for the sprint, and you put in your stories or the work that you want to work on, and that is pretty much almost, hopefully, fixed. So you don't add more things to it, and you can have your team focused for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever your sprint duration is. So there are benefits to one and the other. And if you have multiple Scrum teams working together, what you can do is you can have like a Scrum of Scrums if they are working together towards a end goal, and you align the Scrum Masters of the teams or a person from each team as a representative to say, like, what are the dependencies that they're working together that you need to align and make sure certain things happen at some point.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, Anna.
Awesome. How about continuous deployment at Amazon? Tell us about that.
Yes, most teams, so my teams do continuous deployment and CI/CD. So it's preferable to have your CI/CD pipelines in place. So you put your integration tests in your pipeline, and this way it all flows automatically into production with very little use. Obviously, this doesn't work in all the cases. So not all use cases allow you to do that, because there could be dependencies, and you could be in a shared code base with multiple teams. For example, my team is currently working on the retail website, and that one is massive because it's Amazon.com and all the marketplaces. So you need to be like a little more coordinated to make sure that you get the approvals and things can go into production through gating mechanisms like feature flags or like a web lab to make sure that it is controlled when you move things into production in a controlled manner.
And how is the coordination done for releases? Thank you, Jailer.
Releases. What is releases? Releases, like as in moving to production, a scheduled move to production of something? Okay.
Yeah, I guess let me clarify my question. How in Amazon do you manage releases? Like you mentioned Amazon.com is massive. There's a lot of dependencies. There must be some kind of coordination that indicates that all these guardrails are in place so that they could get deployed, and that nothing breaks, right? How is that done? Yeah, so that's my first question. And my second question is, in Amazon, can the devs have the full capability to do their own deployment from dev all the way to production?
And maybe I can take that, Anna.
Oh, yes. Okay, sure. Go ahead. So I wanted to say that all my teams, until now that I am getting used to the retail experience, but even in retail, you can push your code all the way to production. The engineers can do it internally. So all of my teams have been autonomous and owning their own pipeline and your own services, because we want to make sure that the team can own their own domain and their own charter. So I've never had, that's why I was like hesitating on the releases, because this has never been like a scheduled release or like a planned ahead kind of thing release that you are like, you do that. It probably for external facing services, such as like we release a service externally in AWS, and that's where probably Rohit can come, Rohit can come in and explain that part. But internally for the development teams, it's continuous deployment gated with integration tests and automation.
Yeah, I would like to add, so beauty about like two pizza teams that we discussed is it's small teams, responsibilities are small. So that means teams are decoupled. They can operate independently. They can, work autonomously in terms of decision making, right? And then developers are like always big fans of like pushing the changes, like small portion of changes continuously, right? So, and then we have internally, there's a tool team that is built frameworks that will enable the proper CI/CD pipelines for all the teams. So what happens is you push small fractions of changes, it has to go through, unit testing, integration testing. It has to pass multiple environments before it makes into production. And then the key is, if any of that test fails during that run, there's immediate ability to roll back to the previous version, right? And then the developer, basically, who is responsible for it, will also fix that change ticket, for example. And then that team itself owns everything. Development, testing, like security, I guess bug fixes, everything is owned by that two-pizza team, which makes it easier to control these changes. And then one thing to add probably is, sometimes with some teams, like, there's like gates that Anna mentioned, probably like if you don't have like a lot of developers working over the weekend, you probably don't want it to do like a big change release to a production environments, that you can control the schedules using that gating mechanisms, right? Yeah, I think that's it. Does that answer your question?
You mentioned that the development teams have access for like the security and everything like that. What about like dependencies? How do you organize dependencies from other teams, like infrastructure delivery? How do we see that working when you have dependent?
Yeah, so there's two aspects to this, right? So some teams probably needs like physical hardware, where some teams like operates completely on the backbone of AWS core services, right? So there's a planning that happens in the beginning of the year, right? So that's when, if it requires like cross-functional dependencies, that's when all the dev managers or all the managers from different teams align on priorities, and then you align your sprints accordingly throughout the year. And then most of our teams, we are using AWS in the backend, right? So that means AWS core services. You can spin up infrastructure easily, right? You don't need to wait for any server deliveries or provisioning. So that makes the devs' lives very easier, right? In most of the cases.
Awesome. Thank you.
I wanted to add something on how you maintain why pushing the two things to production is not really that bad, because part of having the ownership is also on monitoring and making sure that you are aware and you have dashboards and you have alarms and you have monitors and you have metrics on all the things that you own. So this way, if a dependency is unavailable or has more latency or there's something going on, you will be alarmed, you will be aware, and then you can start working with those teams that have dependencies. And this is all part of the whole cycle of owning your own code base and all your services and all your pipelines. So it's very important that you're measuring, as you put things in production, you're measuring what's going on, and then you're being able to be alarmed on that.
Awesome.
So
observability.
When you say own in Amazon, does that mean all the devs are all on call? Like, is everyone on call? Everyone could just get paged out and you go fix your stuff.
Yes, there's a on-call rotation for teams. So every team is part of an on-call rotation, and at some point they could be paged, and so would the manager. But we have really well defined, each team has their own defined of standard operation procedures. And if you're ever paged at an odd hour, then you know exactly what to do, and then you will know what teams to follow up with and what to do to bring your services up and what to do in each case. And you have the support of your team if you need it. So it's.
Thank you.
Iqbaldeep, another question.
Another just follow up on the dependencies and dependent teams. You mentioned, Anna, that teams do have their own integration tests. So in case the dependency is flaky or something, I want to ask, how do you isolate your team so that your team can work autonomously when the dependencies are on another team and the dependencies are not working as great in the testing
I think it all comes down to basically how you organize your testing environments as well, right? So the idea is like if there's if your code fails in any of that environment, you should be able to capture it immediately and then send that basically feedback back to your team or back to the other teams. And then if it's like, so basically when you work with a different team, you basically consumers of that product. So that means like if you have an issue that needs to be fixed, right? So there's a feedback loop that happens, and then you know, if it's a production, even though if it's an internal bug, for example, it's still affecting consumers of that product, right? And then that's so that's how we capture everything from this testing using integration environments, and then from our securing like one team's products perspective, like you have an ability to roll back instantaneously when something fails.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. There's a question. Do we know how many average deployments happen daily at Amazon? Anna, I'm looking to you. That's a great question.
Many. I mean, each team can own more than a service, and you could be deploying in your services as often as once a day if you need it. Or, I mean, it happens anytime you actually complete your code and it goes through the pipeline and it goes to production. So it could be as many as teams as Amazon has. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Many, even for the infrastructure, like just by creating the services in AWS, because you have the CDK and all these things, this is code that is being deployed as well. So there's a lot. I wouldn't be able to give a number to that.
Yeah, and then from a tooling perspective, it's very, there's like Anna said, like there's multiple deployments at scale happening parallelly. But the important piece is like from a developer's perspective, if you create like a change request or something, like it is trackable throughout the environment. So if I'm changing like a push, then I would know like where that request is exactly, where it is being tested if it failed. So that ability to monitor that process is really important when it comes to like parallel deployment. So everybody is aware of where all the changes are happening, and then it's easy to debug if there's any issues or like collect further feedback in terms of performance as well.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I asked this question because like sometimes like Amazon become a North Star for like any other company, right? Maybe a smaller or medium-sized company. Like we also want to follow Amazon, right? How they do like deployments, like more than like that should not be a hindrance in any like rolling out any feature or value for the customer.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next hot topic, generative AI. So what is our view on generative AI and how it will change tech moving forward? This is a fun topic. Rohit, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in my view, I look at it very positively. I think the innovation that is happening in the generative AI space will impact a lot of things. It will impact how we work, and then how businesses operate for sure. I think there's a lot of innovation that happened and then were happening. There's a lot of open source models that came to market. A lot of companies are releasing AI services or offering infrastructure that provides support for model development. So I think like the companies can see like what is achievable with these models, right? So I think everybody was looking to transform their business to the next level with the help of these tools. And then I would say that using all this services and infrastructure that is available, training a model and then customizing it based on your use case is much more easier and then achievable right now than years ago, for example. And then so I can see like a major upshift happening, and then I'm looking forward to see what's coming next, and then really excited about all the innovation happening around this area.
Very cool. Thank you. Do you think it's going to threaten our careers? Or do we think we have to change how we work? Like, what do you think that'll look like?
I mean, I think I try to answer that from a innovation perspective, like, because whenever there's a innovation happens in the market, especially in the tech industry, I think like we gradually adapt and then we change how we work, or like our responsibilities changes gradually. Like, for example, I started my career like 10 years ago. And then if I compare how I worked 10 years ago and then how I work now, there's like massive changes, which I didn't even know that I adapted, right? So even like when I guess cloud innovation came in, and then there was like a lot of talks about, oh, is it gonna take people's jobs? Do we need to change the way we work? But I don't hear that conversations often now, because I think like everybody adapted to the cloud, and then we automatically changed how we work.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll continue
So I think
to.
we continue to do the same thing with every innovation. That's my general view on this.
Awesome. Another one concern I've heard quite a bit is about proprietary information. So how do we at Amazon protect our own proprietary information and control employees from using it?
Yeah, we have strict guidelines and policies around protecting proprietary information. Security is job zero for us. So we protect Amazon proprietary information. We protect customer data. I think one of the key areas to think about it is basically like there's like a lot of if you use like AI service, a lot of terms and services around that changes based on companies, right? So probably if you input some data, it can be used in further training or something like that. And then probably there's no standard guidelines around it, right? So that's why we have strict policies internally to protect that data.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. On the topic of working differently in modernization, let's move over to architecture and application modernization. So Bill, what are some of the things you're seeing in the industry that are compelling us and companies to modernize?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Typically, when customers move to the cloud, there's a modernization element of it. The first step is usually around cost, but the main driver, the first thought is usually around cost, but the main driver really is around innovation and velocity, right? So most of the customers that we see that are modernizing in a big way are doing so on behalf of their customers, right? So you look at the different types of experiences that they're able to deliver, whether that's having the ability to offer any same experience, any device, anywhere, anytime, being able to help customers engage with the platform, whether it's a slow day on the internet or a busy day. And an example of that, you look across retail when customers have, or organizations have these big sales, there's a flood of people coming to that website, and they want to make sure that that site is reliable. So we see the ability to have, for example, I was talking to an airline customer this morning, and they talk about their customers need to be able to buy their tickets on their PC, check in online, and then get text updates as their flights change and that sort of thing, right? So really that improved mobile experience, different channels, and now that then impacts the ability to get things out the door quickly, right? So customers are driving them to make releases more often. So instead of 6-month windows, 12-month windows, that sort of thing, it's almost daily, which talks to that what Anna and Rohit were talking about is automation, right? So they're trying to get more agile and nimble. The other piece is when we've got all these mobile applications and they're engaging with the customers, they need to respond really quickly and with increased frequency. So if you think about all the different weather events we've had happening, that's a big burden for insurance providers, for example. So making that experience seamless for the customer, that brings in a ton of data, and now being able to act on those insights as well, right? So we're not just seeing them sit on the data, but actually leverage it through AI, ML, and other things. So driving those insights, automation, get rid of all that manual intervention of bringing documents in and extracting stuff out. The third one, and I talked about profitability earlier, this is a big driver, not just from, hey, you know what, I need to get my cost down on a per unit basis, but from an efficiency of development, right? So many of our customers are seeing most of their time, 80% of their developers' times spent operating systems and getting involved in monitoring, that sort of thing. So innovation, responding to events and insights, increased profitability, and then of course, just with all the security threats and increased compliance and that sort of thing, moving to the cloud to modernize to gain those benefits as well.
Awesome. So when you are helping the customers across Canada, what have you seen as the biggest blocker to modernization, or challenges or roadblocks?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what I just said about spending a lot of the time on operations and not really on innovation. So in Canada, we see, and I look at the Canadian market being a little bit behind some of the other regions that we work with, where customers in, let's say, US West are moving really quick. They're very innovative. Canada still tends to be getting into the cloud, right? So a lot of data center exits, moving that workload into the cloud, and getting the benefits of not having to provision or procure the compute side of things, but they're still managing everything along with that, right? There's still OS updates, patching, scaling, all those sort of things. And so being able to deliver that innovation kind of comes second. The good news is that the area that myself and Sean are in, which is serverless, essentially abstracts away a lot of that operational side of things. We provide the scalability of compute. We do all the patching and operating system maintenance stuff so that our customers can focus in on the innovation side of things. Developers and operators come together in a DevOps model in this scenario, and that leads to the ability to create new applications.
Awesome. One of the surprising things that I noted when I took my role on about 2 years ago and then met with, enterprise level customers in Western Canada was the proliferation of containerization. So tell me a bit more about that. What is the adoption that we're seeing in Canada for containerization?
Yeah, so containers is definitely a popular next step in terms of moving from just EC2. Customers have options of going fully serverless, like I've been talking about around using our Lambda services, or going to containers. For many workloads which don't need to be continually enhanced, or might be a bit legacy, containers is a great first step. We often see customers that are using Kubernetes will typically pick up a managed open source version from AWS. So not only does it get them into containers on the cloud, but it also gets them into a managed service as well. So reduce that. Other customers are looking to build net new, and they use some of our cloud native container solutions. So within our world here in the compute business, containers is a big piece of that. I would say most of our modernization, at least today, is on the container side of things, with a little bit of Lambda, for example, for customers that are building net new, scalable, event-driven applications. So it's certainly an area that we're investing significantly in.
Awesome. Thank you. Sean, tell me a bit more about AWS's well-architected framework and how it helps our customers design and make the design decisions for what they're building.
Yeah, for sure. So the well-architected framework is basically a framework that falls under pillars that we've designed, where you can look at your different applications and basically rate them up against the pillars. So one thing that we typically do, and as a solution architect, I do this a lot with my customers, where they will plan on building something, or they would have already built something, or potentially have something running in the cloud, and they just want to make sure they're following all the best practices. So what we do is we open up the well-architected tool within the AWS console. It's a free service, and it reads very much like a survey. You open it up, there's a whole bunch of questions, and really for each question, It's really, are you doing this or are you not doing it? And it'll be things like, like there's a security pillar, and under the security pillar, it's going to say, are you using least privilege access? And so, that's just one of the questions. And of course, you can read that through, and you can click it and say, yep, we're doing that. And at the end of everything, after you go through the entire well-architected review, which, by the way, it's pretty large. When I do these for customers, I usually spend, I'm going to say, probably about 8 hours for the entire review if we go through all the different pillars. And after that, you'll get a scorecard. And the scorecard is going to tell you the things you need to work on the most. And then it's going to tell you the things you're doing well, the things you need to work on the least. And so that kind of gives you a priority sequence of things to start working on to make your application better. And it could be better on cost, resilience, all the different pillars that we have. And so the one thing I also want to say about that is a lot of customers take the well-architected review. I'll tell them about it, they'll open it up, and they'll see it's just a list of questions. And a lot of people hate that, right? They say, well, I can go through this tool and I can click yes on everything. And you can tell me what I'm doing good or what I'm doing wrong. But at the end of the day, it's just a scorecard. And so I usually question them on that. And that's why I usually like to be in the sessions, or like to have someone who has done it before, has done it effectively, to be in that session. And the way I like to actually run those is when you run through the questionnaire, instead of just saying yes or no, it's, like, are we using least privilege access? You might say yes to that, but then I'll ask how, like, what tools are you using? Have you thought about role-based access and things like that? So I really like to make it a conversation instead of just, I've done this or I haven't done it.
Awesome. So what do you do when you find customers that aren't running the best practices?
So when we go through these scorecards, and actually I had a customer, one of my customers last year, we went through this, and at the end of every section, they saw that there was all these big red flags. And, they were maybe hitting 2 good things out of 14. And they were like, are these numbers really bad? And they're really concerned. They were thinking they're just doing everything wrong. And I said, no, don't worry about that. Nobody's 100% on this. So we went back and we said, like, you're doing a lot of good stuff. A lot of the things in the well-architected framework, you may not even do those things, right? Like they were a smaller company. Some things within the well-architected framework, they're probably overkill for this customer. So you're never going to be perfect. You probably don't want to be perfect. But then what we did is we took that scorecard afterwards, and they felt a little better once I told them, don't freak out, this is common. But then we started to prioritize these things. And we actually had our ProServe team come in, and they looked at some of the highest priority items, and they said, hey, you know what, we're going to help you with these right away. But it helped the customer reduce cost, increase performance, increase security, and really build the stories from within that applications that can make them more successful on that application.
Awesome. Pallav, you have a question.
Yeah, so my question is around modernization. So probably for Bill, or anybody can answer. So let's say a customer or a company, they have a legacy workload, and they have already moved to cloud. Basically, it was a lift and shift, and now they are thinking of doing the modernization because there was no refactoring. Nothing was done earlier. They just made those applications to work in a cloud. So what sort of things now the company can look at when they are thinking of modernization after cloud migration?
Sean, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of our customers do a lift and shift into the cloud. It's the easiest way to get into the cloud. Once you're there, we see kind of a different range of things, right? So probably the easiest shift from going on EC2 is to start taking those applications and assessing them in containers, right? Because containers can be very similar to EC2. You still have like a lot of the same tooling. You still have like the different application servers and all that you can move into a container. But then when you move into a container, you now get the scalability out of it, right? Where your containers, first of all, the footprint of a container is very small. And then you can scale those containers a lot easier than you can scale something like EC2, even though EC2 is actually quite easy to scale, but it's really the lower footprint. Now, a lot of our customers, they'll move stuff into the cloud, then they'll say, well, these specific applications, they mean a lot to us, and we want to do a little bit more investment in here. And that's where we see a lot of customers going into serverless. And serverless gives you extreme scalability, right? Because now, instead of scaling containers, you're actually scaling at the transaction level, right? So as I get more users coming into serverless, I'm actually scaling on a per user basis. And if I split those into microservices, my different microservices they're going to scale independently. So we do see a lot of customers doing that, and that really lowers your operations. And this builds the whole flywheel effect that it's a core Amazon principle where we like to kind of put the work in like on the front side of a project to make sure it's done the right way. And then that helps us, for example, do less operations down the road, which means we can focus more on innovation, which means the more innovation comes in, it removes operations, maybe out of more EC2, and it just keeps on, spinning this flywheel faster and faster. But that is pretty much a transition we see. So a lot of customers go from EC2 to containers to serverless. Or another example, like I actually have a customer that's doing a lot of lift and shift right now to the cloud, but then they're taking their crown jewel applications, the things that really matter within their organization, and they're just moving those straight to serverless because they know that these are things that they want to perform extremely well, and they don't want to worry about operations on them.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, just on that thread, any sort of business critical application that is bursty, for example, that needs to scale up, scale down, that's a really good candidate for serverless. And to Sean's kind of viewpoint on the EC2, it's not an either or discussion. Like within, you may have certain apps that'll go containers, others that go serverless, but there's many that will have both. And this is where the customer may decide to rewrite or refactor these. A really good example, one that I like about this is a company called AXA. They do insurance. They're an insurance provider, and they have this product for cars. So it takes telematics exchange data, takes it's connected cars, it gets information from the car, including weather and mapping and all that sort of thing. And what they wanted to do was change the model of insurance premiums and quotes. So it's pay by mile, how much is the person driving, what is their the weather look like, and get post-trip immediate feedback. So what they did was they came to AWS, they took this version, it's called Tex. They did version 1 on EC2. And what they found was, again, they were patching, they were maintaining, they never really got to drive value out of this. So they took a step back on that. And in fact, they were EC2 for compute, they were Kafka on EC2, Postgres SQL on EC2, as well as MongoDB. They took a look at their application and they realized that, half of this, or not half, 90% of what they were going to use it for was asynchronous streaming car data. It needed to be really scalable. It was bursty. They wanted cost optimizations with it, and they really wanted to integrate with some of the streaming services. So 90% there, and then 10% of it was containers. They also then found that they needed streaming and messaging, and so they mixed these things up. Their solution actually ended up being a mix of application integration, streaming, containers, and serverless, and ultimately they were able to drive efficiencies and then invest on behalf of the customers for more of a business outcome for the solution.
Perfect. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. So if you've got any sort of application that you're thinking that is business critical and you're looking at modernizing, feel free to reach out and we can have a discussion about that.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're going to move on to our favorite topic, which is hiring and interviewing and bar raising. Everyone is here because we managed to survive the interview process, the loop process at Amazon. So let's talk a bit about that. NK, thank you for joining. Tell me about the role of a bar raiser and the whole notion of raising the bar at Amazon.
Am I muted now? Okay, so a bar raiser is like an objective third-party interviewer. So they are pretty much very experienced interviewers at Amazon who have gone through like a rigorous training process to become bar raisers, and their primary responsibility is to ensure that Amazon is making the best, that we're making the best long-term hires for the company. So typically when we hire at Amazon, depending on the job role, the candidate interviews with 4 or more interviewers normally. This will include like a hiring manager, other interviewers, and a bar raiser. Now, the hiring manager may have an urgent business need to fill the role. Sometimes the interviewers may come from the same business unit as the hiring manager, and of course, also feel the pressure to fill that role too. And so they may not be as objective because of the pressure to fill that role. So the hiring manager is like that impartial person who is not from the hiring manager's team, and they act as an objective third party. They look at it from a different point of view, like, is this someone who we need to hire? Would the person the best long-term hire for Amazon? Is the person going to really be successful at Amazon? So that is their job. So they kind of counterbalance the hiring manager's pressure to hire and fill that position very quickly. So to answer, the notion of raising the bar is that we don't sacrifice the quality of a hire just to meet a short-term business need. We need to ensure that whoever we're hiring is raising the bar. Raising the bar means that that person is coming in and the person is better than 50% of the people currently in that role. And for hiring decision to be made, that person must be better than 50%, and the hiring manager and the bar raiser must agree on that candidate. So that's what it means to raise the bar, more or less.
Awesome. Thank you. So interview preparation, Bill, you kind of spoke about that at the beginning. How do we help, how can we help candidates, or what can help candidates prepare for interviewing at Amazon?
Yeah, I'd say interviewing at Amazon is different than any other organization I've interviewed with, right? You go through a process where there might be 5 or 6 people that are interviewing you, and it's not so much where you would go in and you've got your resume and the person says, well, hey, tell me about what you did. I was at TELUS before. Well, tell me what you did at TELUS. Tell me what you did at this company. It's very much story based, and it's really about the body of work that you've done, not just in your previous role, but kind of over the course of your career. And this ties back into the leadership principles, right? So the interviewers are generally looking for how you do on certain leadership principles. It's a divide and conquer sort of thing. So one of them might be customer obsession. And so they'll ask you a question like, tell me about a time when you went over and above for a customer, or tell me about a time where you had to escalate on behalf of a customer. And so there you really want to go through the STAR format and talk about the situation, what your actions were, what the results were, and be very clear and concise on this. Have a few stories for each LP. So basically what I did when I applied or interviewed for my role was I took customer obsession and I thought about what are the examples. Maybe it was 2 from each role that I had that illustrate this. And then I went through all the LPs. Or you can look at the other way and say, hey, you know what? I did some really impactful things in my last role. This is what the situation was, and here's all the details around it. Now this hits 3 or 4 or 5 of these LPs, and that becomes a really good story. And what will happen after the interview is as NK was saying, the bar raiser and the people will get together and they'll all compare kind of notes. I spoke with Bill on these leadership principles, and they'll kind of look at it and say, you know what, this story was really good. It also had elements of others. And so really, they're really looking for how are you demonstrating the LPs through your stories. So in my case, I ended up mapping out all of my cool things into slides, and I went from there.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
I can piggyback on that. So as a recruiter, we prep candidates before they have on-site, before they have interviews. So technically, we advise them on what the LPs mean. So we want people to know that don't just think about the way you interpret an LP, but how Amazon interprets it. Example, some people might not understand what have backbone, disagree, and commitments in Amazon, or understand what it means to think big. So you need to understand it the way Amazon interprets it, and then develop your stories based on that. Now, as Bill said, a great story will be able to have at least 4 or 5 LPs in it, such that when we have what we call the debrief, which is the meeting where interviewers meet together at the end of the interview, and let's say one interviewer is supposed to assess you to see if you have customer obsession as in the story you gave, and maybe the story you gave was maybe not a very strong one, and you were not able to show the customer obsession. Another interviewer might find that maybe a story you gave them was so beautiful and so strong that they were able to not only find dive deep, we also find customer obsession. And so when we're having that discussion, the person interviewer might say, you know what, he didn't do so great. I couldn't say any customization in his story. And the interviewer goes, you know what, he gave me such a great story that I could not only find dive deep, I found customer obsession, I found her background in Instagram and commit. So the important thing is to have really strong stories that highlight you in the best possible way. And you find that if the stronger the story, the more LPs you'll find coming up in them. That's the way to do well at Amazon interviews.
Awesome. I think there was a magic word that Bill said, and that's impact. And we talk a lot about outcome and impact at Amazon, and that also is aligned to our data-driven. So as you're preparing for the interviews, if you can come up with your examples and you support your examples with numbers. For example, we have 40 participants in this meeting right now. It's going to go on YouTube. So for now we have 40. Maybe when it goes on YouTube, we're going to have thousands and thousands of hits. That is a bigger impact than the 40 that are here right now. But that's an example of if I provide a story about how I helped 5 people, I mentored 5 people within and my team at work, but then those 5 people then mentored 5 people who mentored 5 people. That's sort of that scale and impact and outcome. So when you're prepping your stories, think numbers, think force multiplying work, think impact and scope and scale. And those are the type of things that we like to see. I will say one more thing. Something that's peculiar about Amazon is we do not necessarily reward the lone wolf or the heroes or the people that go above and beyond. We reward the people that share the knowledge and that help other people so that they can help other people. We reward the team players. So sometimes we will get people with these amazing stories of incredible things that they've done. But as Sean mentioned about the flywheel, the second that they're out of the equation, what they're doing stops. And that is something that we think, well, that's amazing what they've done, but how are they going to be able to share that knowledge and allow everyone else to do what they're doing? And that's kind of something that we look for in candidates, specifically within the role that I hire, that force multiplying. I can see Bill thinking.
Yeah, and Melissa, that kind of gave me a thought. It's really critical in these interviews that you talk about the impact that you had specifically, right? So oftentimes, we don't always want to be taking credit for everything, or we'll go in and say, you know what, I worked at this organization and we did this, my team did this. It's really critical that you kind of say, you know what, the overall project was A, B, and C. My role was X, Y, Z, and these were the outcomes that we had, because it's very easy to work on a big team and see lots of success. And what our interviewers want to see is, what did you specifically contribute? What challenges did you overcome? And what value did you add? So I think that's a really critical piece, because I've been on several of these, we call them loops. And it's a real struggle sometimes to say, okay, well, tell me what you did. And then once that person opens up, it's like, yeah, they know what they're doing, because your interviewer will probe and probe and probe and get down to see how much of this is a group thing and how much of it was an individual thing, contribution wise.
And yes, peel the onion, exactly. And that's one thing that I actually, when I prep people, and I actually have I think there's a YouTube, I can link it here, where I was on how to prep for specifically the technical account manager role. When your interviewers are asking you questions, that does not mean you're getting the question wrong. That means that they are looking for those data points so that when they talk with the other members of the interview panel afterwards, they holistically build a story of who you are and what amazing things you can bring to Amazon. And the other thing I will mention is the intention of the panel is also to hold each other accountable of biases. So unconscious biases we talk about a lot. And the panel will actually point out when their teammates are potentially bringing in biases, like, oh yeah, I come from a VMware background. This person didn't know VMware at all. It's like, it's not about that. It's not about specific technologies. It's about the leadership principles. So we hold each other accountable from biases as well, which is the intention of the multiple person panel that you'll interview with. Okay, and what? Oh, and how? Yes. Okay. I have another question about interviewing. Do you need to always know what technology is coming next in order to do well in an Amazonian interview?
So I can answer from a business development product manager perspective. No, you don't need to know the specific technology and all the details of it. In fact, I had applied for a role. My first one was a technical product manager for one of our messaging services. I came in for the loop. I did some research beforehand, so I knew what the services were and what they did. The panel found that I wasn't technical enough for that role. However, the body of work and all the business development marketing side of things that I had and the ability to learn technology set me up really well for a business development role. And the team collectively worked with the recruiter to find me the role that fit. So no you don't need to know specifically the technology. However, there's an expectation that in any role that you've done, there'll be a question like, what did you do to prepare for this interview, right? So they want to be sure that you've, number one, either learned technology in the past and you can demonstrate that, or they'll even look at what you did to prepare. Again, this is for kind of the not as much technical roles, and I'm sure somebody else on the panel that's in the tech side of it. I'm sure you guys have some specific technology side things.
Yeah, I can talk to the technical side of it. When we go into interviews on the technical side, we actually don't expect you to know AWS even, right? So you don't have to know what's coming next. You don't even have to know AWS or cloud. One example I have with someone who we were inclined and eventually got hired at AWS. They were a database administrator for about 20 years, never worked in the cloud. They were predominantly an Oracle DBA. Every question we asked them really came back to, how to operate Oracle, how to do everything with Oracle. So it was very specific. So what we did to interview this candidate was really start looking at those leadership principles up against the different technical aspects of it. So we started to say, like when a situation came up and you didn't know what to do, did you learn and be curious? And of course, we don't tell them we're looking for learn and be curious, but we try to get that answer out of them. We tried to see, did they dive deep? If there was an issue, did you take ownership of that issue? And so that's what we're really looking for during the interviews. And yes, we're going to make sure that you are providing accurate technical information, but it does not have to relate to the cloud.
Go ahead, I see.
Yeah, no, piggyback on Sean's comment, like same thing, like when I was with professional services, we were hiring for, DevOps roles. And then in that role, you work with different AWS developer tools, but it's not an expectation that you should know the AWS developer tools, right? Instead, we look at the DevOps domain, and then we try to see like, what the interviewee know about that specific domain rather than working on like a specific service or a tool.
Yeah. So that's actually a good point. That's how we also interview. Sean, you want to?
I got one more thing. There's two red flags I've seen people being really hit for on interviews. The one, I would say probably try not to screen share with anybody at Amazon. I've seen like certain interviews. I've seen a couple now where someone screen shares and they accidentally have PII information or something from their current organization that they're at. It's an immediate red flag. So don't do that. It's really good advice because I've seen it a couple times now. It's like, oh no, don't show me this. Please don't show me.
That's horrible.
The second thing is don't lie on your resume. I've had a couple of people come in to say I am 400 level on networking in AWS or EC2. So we'll start asking you 300 to 400 level questions. And if you can't answer those,
also good advice.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah. I can say earns trust is a big part of the interview process, where you can have the same story or same elements of a story told to 2 different people, and we share notes, and then we're like, well, that's not good. And so, yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. I will say though, Sean, we do realize that some people's level 400 is other people's level 200, and the leveling is a little bit of a religious debate internally. But yeah, I think that that's really good advice, and that, earns trust is huge in the interview process. And so just be yourself. We always say be your authentic self, because if you're not, the loop participants will sense that, and that'll come out in the interview.
And Melissa touched on comparing notes. I think something to know from a peculiarity perspective when you do come in for one of these interviews or loops, especially if it's in person, is that we will be taking notes verbatim. Like the person that's interviewing may not even look up at you because we're trying to capture everything. And it's yeah, Melissa's raising her hand there. So that is something that does take some getting used to, especially if you're somebody that likes to have that visual feedback and cues. And it took a couple of these sessions for me to figure that one out too.
Yeah, we're trying to gather as much data as possible from you to enable us make our decision, and also to be able to counter any biases that come out during the debrief. And so it's important. So if you notice that the interviewer is constantly typing and not looking at you, it's not you, it's them. And then we're just trying to ensure that we have all we need to be able to make our decision more or less. Yeah.
So like in general advice, prepare your stories very well so that you can tell it as a story, and that you can set the context, and then what you did, what was the impact, like make sure that you're answering the question, because then as an interviewer, it's very hard when the interviewee jumps into the middle of the story and is like, I did this, and you're like, wait, tell me about it. And then it's really hard to follow and the conversation doesn't flow. So help yourself and like practice the stories and get all your data points, your things in order. Just be yourselves, be calm, but have like a storytelling process. Your communication is very important because you only have like that 1 hour with the person, and you want to make sure that they get all the awesomeness that you're bringing to here.
Awesome.
So there's a question on the chat, Melissa. What are some things that lead to people struggling with their role after they join Amazon?
What are some things that lead to people struggling in their role at Amazon? Okay.
Can I answer that?
Yeah,
question?
yes, please. That's a good one.
Yeah, so I would say culture shock is usually a big one. So when I joined a team that was based in Vancouver. My boss was in Seattle. I didn't really get a lot of FaceTime with her. We're expected to take on our tasks, but Amazon is just a different beast in that sense, is that there's lots of information, a lot of people seemingly running around doing stuff. We have 200 plus services, partly because we like to all run around as two pizza teams and do them. So I would say that coming in, I didn't know cloud at all, to kind of to Sean's point there. It was tough getting used to the writing stuff. And that's where I think it's really important you hopefully can have a good mentor or a good leader that can help you coach you through. It took me, I've compared this with other people, a good 6 months to really start feeling comfortable. And then there's always going to be some wrench that's thrown into that, but that's the same as any other organization. And like I said, I just celebrated my 4th year here. And so you get through it, but it's really, I'd say the culture, it's a different way of working.
Yeah, I can add on to that too, that I wouldn't call it struggling per se, more like adapting, because Amazon is very different in our culture. And also Amazon is constantly evolving. So today, something you were doing the day before, that could change the following day and you have to learn something new. And Amazon understands that you need time to ramp up. So as a recruiter, when I joined in, we already knew that you need at least 3 to 4 months to ramp up to be able to understand our processes and our systems and the way we do things internally. So you might see it as struggling, but it's more like adapting to the new system and the new way. And eventually they will get to that point where they are successful in the role.
I will also add that when we do interview, we identify with pretty much every candidate growth opportunities already. So we provide that to the hiring manager to say, so we've hired, this is the, this is what we believe is a great way to support the candidate coming on board. Potentially, well, they've got all this great experience, but not necessarily great experience or vast experience with executive presence or meeting with CTOs or CIOs. So let's pair them up with mentors, which is a great segue to Martin's question, which is how do you instill that mentorship mentality and development of others? And how do you get folks to communicate, open up, and be communicative to help others and cross-team support? I love this question. And this is a huge part of the Amazon culture, which is relentless and constant feedback. So we believe in feedback and mentoring and coaching. We constantly share growth opportunities with each other. We constantly share superpowers with each other. So once a year, we have a feedback cycle that we mute someone, sorry. So once a year, we have a feedback cycle where we give that feedback as well. We hold our teams accountable for that vulnerable type of feedback at the team level as well. And so through mentoring, coaching, asking each other for help, pairing up people with different people that can help you when you're adapting to the role in Amazon, that's a huge part of the culture to help each other.
I will say one more thing, that I think the heart of it all is the leadership principles. We're all following the same guidelines and we're all kind of going in the same way. So leadership principles really get you together and all thinking in kind of the same line, same wavelength.
Yeah, that alignment. Okay, one more. Do you have any advice to someone who wants to change their career to cloud or DevOps without any relevant work experience? Amazon accepts self-taught candidates without great stories. That's a good one. I will say, so we do within AWS have retraining programs available. Specifically, I know about them from the ID and Need Championship perspective. So we've got programs for mothers who would like to return to work after being off for leave. And we do have in the US some retraining opportunities from career. Without great stories, I think each role has different basic qualifications and preferred qualifications. So within each role, you will have to meet the basic qualifications, whether it's 5 years of engineering experience or 5 years of development experience or whatever those basic qualifications are. But the leadership principles, those soft skills, they come from the strangest of places. I have interviewed some people and literally, they've got these amazing stories that are from, whatever fast food management leadership experience they have. So it does not need to be from a technology company, from a leadership skills perspective or leadership principles perspective, but those business qualification, technical competencies that may be required are sort of our non-negotiable. I will say this. It is documented and well known that women only apply for jobs of which they believe they have 100%, they meet 100% of the qualifications. Whereas men are something like 60%, don't quote me on that, might be 40. So we encourage you to go for it. We encourage you to go for it. There's great recruitment and sourcers like NK who will be forthcoming with you about your, where you're at. And how you can grow into the role or potentially roles that you may be well suited for within Amazon and AWS. I don't know if that answered the question, but I guess leadership principles come without cloud and DevOps, but business qualifications are what you need to focus on.
Oh, and to add just a little, like during the interview loop, if you are really good in the leadership principles, and maybe in some of the dimensions, the panel, like the people in the loop identify that you are really good for Amazon. You have the culture fit, right? But you're not good for this role. They will see on what other of the multiple roles you could fit, and the recruiter will reach out to you and say, hey, we want you because you are great, but let's try with these other technical skills or these other type of skills that you are more aligned to what you are telling us in the stories, and you will make sure to like set you up for success, not just a straight out decline.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
especially when we were looking for DevOps candidates in my previous org, it also depends on like what level the job postings are. Like sometimes there's like levels that is opened up, which is not required like a lot of industry experience. But then if you're like self-taught, you're really good in leadership principles, and then it also depends on teams' capacity to train you, right? So it's all about how you perform in the interview, how well you understand probably DevOps and cloud, and then also in terms of the role level, and then the team capacity to train you and then mentor you. So there's like different factors to that.
Yeah, just to add to this, at Amazon, when you are being interviewed for a role, the interviewers are also assessing you for not only that role, but similar roles like that one example. And as if you're interviewing for maybe a software engineer role, they could also be assessing you for the higher level role, lower level role, or even the SysDev, that system engineer role. So it's important to, no matter what role you're being interviewed for, to show yourself in the best possible way so that they know if you're fit for Amazon, and then they could find where they could put you into, more or less. I've had a software manager who eventually was given a role as a technical writer because he was a better fit for that one, and he loved it because that's where his strength was, more or less. So it's important to just let yourself shine, and then we'll find a great role for you at Amazon.
A good question with a scary answer. How long is the loop? Was it 1 hour with a multi-person panel and team?
No, so it depends on the role. Some roles have 4 interviewers, some roles have up to 6, 7 interviewers. So it depends. And it's typically one-on-one, you and an interviewer, unless you have a shadow interviewer who is kind of like learning on the job, learning from the main interviewer. But typically one-on-one, you and the interviewer face-to-face for about 45 minutes to 1 hour, typically.
Yeah, so in general, I think there's 4 1-hour interviews in one day, could be 5. And some roles may have a phone screen that happens before the 4-hour loop, which we call the loop. And the notes are shared through an internal hiring tool that we have. The interviewer takes the notes, and then we meet as an interviewing team after to discuss the candidate, like we talked about, and make sure that we have an unbiased view. We talk about all the aspects of the leadership principles.
And it's not always one day. Since we're now virtual, some interviews are sometimes 2 days. So we could have 3 interviews on day 1, 2 on day 2, or 2 and 2, depends on the candidate's availability and preference.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm posting the survey. Thank you for sharing your feedback, taking the time to fill out the survey. If you missed it at the beginning, the survey is 5 questions. The 5th question is your email address, and that is because we are doing a random draw. I will do a random draw. Actually, Willie, I'll probably call you tomorrow as my auditor to do the random draw with me, to win either a $50 Amazon gift card or a custom Amazon or AWS hoodie, depending on where your heart lies. We can also get a hold of the Women in Engineering logo, and we can get one of our hoodies for that as well. Yeah, Anna's like, yep, I've got one of those. Yep. So please do give us feedback. What did you like? What would you like to see different? What would you like to learn more about? Thank you so much for the great questions today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. This was really excellent range of topics that were covered today, and a lot of great ideas. I mean, for myself, I was really discovering a lot of things that we can implement in our organizations.
Nice.
So thank you very much for sharing this experience with us and spending almost, 2 hours with us today. And Melissa, fantastic moderation. Thank you very much for that.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to leave you with 2 book recommendations because I actually was last panel I went to, they left with homework. So here's homework number 1. Working backwards. My boss, when I joined, got me this book to help me understand the culture. So that's a very interesting book to check that out. Working Backwards by Colin Breyer. And book recommendation number 2, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. This is more specifically aligned with the feedback culture that we have here within Amazon to help each other grow, to help our teams grow, to help our leaders grow, the nonstop feedback that we give and receive. Great book about that. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining. Thank you to my panel. Thank you, NK, Rohit, Anna, Sean, and Bill for spending your Tuesday night with us. Very much appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
To be
Have a good
here.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Bye.
It's fantastic.
See ya.